Tell me, are you ready to find your weird way? Weird was a concept that was spoken of long ago. It meant fate, it meant destiny, it meant your path in life. I'm your host, Dean Bentley, and I am here to explore how you can connect to your own path in life, to know the essence of your own soul, to connect to that single spark that lives within the deepest recesses of your being that says, "This is why I am here," to go beyond the limitations, the constrictions of the modern world, and open you to the possibilities and the potentiality of what is possible within this world. Join me as we dive deep on the weird way. Welcome back, everyone. We have another episode of The Weird Way coming at you, and I am deeply, deeply excited and honored today. This one feels extra special for me. We've got a guest today that I haven't seen in a few years, and there's just such a sense of heartwarming to come back to these conversations with people that I've met along the path and have had such a special spot in my own transformation as well as my own growth, but also seeing their own journey along the way. So today we have the CEO and founder of Luna Wild, a company dedicated to helping bring back the sacred for feminine rites of passage, host of the Fort Room podcast. And this is how I found her in the first place, something that was held very deep to my heart. And I'm probably going to share a story about that later. A coach and mentor, and probably a little bit of mystery as well. Hallie Rose, welcome to The Weird Way. It's such a pleasure to have you here today.
Oh, thank you, Dean. It's so great to be here. Thank you for having me. I'm honored.
Mm. Speaking of this, how it feels so important for me to come back to people that have had such a significant role in my life. So, for those that don't know, Hallie Rose was one of my first coaches, was my first coach, and I found her through her podcast, The Weird Way. And the night before, I listened to an
No,
episode where
that's
she
your podcast.
Yes, the fourth room. My mind's catching up to the words that's coming out of my tongue. Thank you for that. So the night before, I reached out to her about coaching and mentoring, and actually listened to an episode of the Fort Room. I'll get it right now. Um, I was out in the middle of a woods praying, asking, "Hey, I need a sign. I need something right now." And I felt very lost. I'd just spent a few months traveling by myself. I'd spent quite an amount of time going through my own awakening, and something I've shared on here quite a few times. And I was very lost. And this is why mentoring and coaching has had such a deep spot in my heart. Because after I prayed that night, and I wasn't someone who prayed before this, I was just like, show me something, because I can't do this anymore. I can't keep going the same way. And I was at a point where I was literally broken. And the next day, I heard an episode of The Fort Room, and Hallie put out, "Hey, I'm taking on coaches, mentors, mentees." And I was like, shit, I know that is for me. I just knew in that. And there's moments like this I find along everyone's journey where there's just, I know this is for me. I know I have to say that. And I messaged you, and we had a chat. You had a call. At the time, the investment was $7,000, and that Australian, and that was everything I had in my account. And I was like, holy shit, am I actually committing to myself in this moment? And that was a moment where I was like, yes, this is what I'm here to do. And it was a moment where I said yes to myself and my own journey. And I know this is such an important thread for so many people. And I'm curious, because to hold that frequency for someone else and being like, hey, I trust that you're meant to take this step. I know that you've been on your own journey. I've heard episodes of the Fort Room where you share this, but it's the moments where you've had to really hold that of like, I need to step into this unknown. I can feel my soul calling me into something else right now, and I need to be willing to take that step.
Absolutely. And how was it for you?
How was it for me?
Well,
It
it was
was,
probably scary. You said that was all you had in your account. So there's people listening to this who is like, can I swear on this podcast?
yes, you can swear.
They're like, holy shit, that's a lot of money. I would never do that. And a lot of people don't. And they stay there. And for good reason. That's a really scary, you're trusting us. I was a stranger to you. But we're also talking about the intuition. And we're also talking about investing in ourselves, not just in terms of money, but in terms of energy, which is this frequency of deserving. And what a lot of people find is there's that choice point moment of, okay, this person has told me clearly, like, this is the cost of this. It is an unknown. I don't even know. What if I don't get what I want out of it? What if I come out of this, I've give away all my money and then I'm the same? And that's the fear. That's the fear. And it stops so many people from whatever that is that's within reach for them, or I want to say just outside of reach of the comfort zone. That's where a lot of us get stopped and get blocked. But it's actually a really important part of the self initiation into the next part of your own particular hero's journey. If you don't believe that you can change, or if you don't have trust that this is the right thing, it can stop us from making that difficult choice. But you did it, and I look back on our time together with so much fondness. I loved working together. I was blown away by your vulnerability, the way that you would show up to our calls, how seriously and playfully you took the work that we did together, how you were so willing to explore some of the very absurd exercises that I gave to you to play with different parts of your identity and personality that you were getting to know. And so I want to know, like, how do you think that played into your journey? What was the result?
A big part was learning how to say yes to the terror of transformation. And I use the word terror because I think it is that when we go through these initiatory processes, for me, we face death, that moment where we know who we are has to die. And when I said yes to you, it was like, I don't know. And I've been someone who's been very controlling in my life. I've wanted to know that when I do this, I get this result. I came from an engineering degree before that, and I was like, here's you do A, you plus B, you get C. And that was how I lived my life. And so to break that pattern and that paradigm of this is the way I was living, absolutely terrifying. To, in a way, take the gamble of I'm willing to live, I'm willing to risk everything I have figuratively and literally of like, oh, cool, I can see the universe brought me to this moment. And there was just this knowing of like, are you willing to give everything to your journey? And up until that point, I hadn't really done that. So there was this, oh, I'm in my journey, exploring myself, but I was isolated, I was alone, I didn't really have people that I felt could see me and trusted me. And so when I said yes to that, I also said yes to being seen and supported and open to people sharing the depths of their own soul with me. So when I said yes to that, I can track back to that experience and I can see the stepping stones that happened after that. After our work, I found a new mentor in person. I found a men's group. I found men's retreats. I found brothers that I could be in circle with, that I could meditate with. And before that moment, it wasn't something I experienced. And so it was I can see it for me when I have a conversation with someone. It's less, it's yes, I'm having a conversation with this person, but there's also a conversation with the universe I'm having in that moment. And when I said yes to that, it was like I'm saying yes to that depth of myself that wants to come online and also being willing to meet the layers of fear and discomfort of challenge of who I am because I believed I was this certain way and I reflect on our journey and like some of my deepest fins came up of like, who am I? And I was exploring that in a very deep way. And you were able to hold me in that. And without that, I think I would have stuck in this box of this is who I am, especially as a man, and really opened up to possibilities of life, not just within my relationships, but also within even business, because it was like, oh, there's ways to do this that I'd never considered. And when we open ourselves to new ways of being, it all comes in many different forms. So when I track back to that, I see a lot of transformation that came through that experience.
It's so beautiful to watch you expand. When you reached out to me and you shared that you had started a podcast, I was just like, yes. Like this is such a beautiful step. And yeah, I also want you to know I haven't accepted a podcast interview in probably a year or a year and a half. This is my first time behind the mic. Um, and I am so happy to be doing this with you.
Mm. It feels really, really beautiful to have you come in and come out of. I feel like when I've seen you, there's been a detachment from the social media or coming back home, and I find that such a beautiful thing to really journey deeply into ourselves. And I know for me, there's been this separation that I've wanted to create more and more space between the social world and my own internal world. And it feels like there may be this internal dive that you're doing at the moment.
Yes. Yeah, absolutely. It's funny because I don't think I've posted on social media in over a year. And that was a choice for me that people in the industry that I was a part of, and I do call it an industry very intentionally, this coaching, spiritual influencership, self help, self healing zone. A lot of these individuals, their business is online and it's fueled through constant content. And so I, contrary to what I see a lot of people doing, which is like, hey, I'm going to post telling everybody I'm taking a social media hiatus or I'm taking 30 days off Instagram or whatever. Like, I just stopped because it wasn't really about other people. It was about me. And it started with me with kind of realizing, you mentioned the thought room that had been my biggest love and creation and pride and joy for about 3 years, 3.5. And when I started the podcast, I had absolutely no money, nothing, Dean, just like had to borrow money to buy podcast equipment. I couldn't even pay a, anyone to really help me with the podcast at first. So I was doing it all on my own. Then I needed help and I found somebody that I could pay $100 an episode to help me, which for me at the time was like more than I had because I was volunteering down at Soltara at the time. And so it was a huge leap of faith. And I didn't expect to make any money doing it. In fact, for a while, I didn't because that was never the intention. And I think that's also what makes a show so good. If you go listen to it, my desire was for people to not feel like they're being sold things. I've never run ads on my show, had lots of offers to, especially as it started to turn more heads. And it kind of rose into like the top 1% of podcasts shared globally, according to Spotify. And the types of guests that were being attracted were different. Now, everybody who had written a book was sending me copies of their book and, wanting to come on and talk about their programs. And I noticed within myself it was almost like the passion had changed because certain aspects of it I still loved. I love the conversation, but parts of the industry And the relationships that were being created felt very commodifying. It's like someone comes onto the show, they have an offering, they have something they want to sell, we talk about it. Still, there's tons of amazing wisdom shared there. And so it's not anything about the guests, it was about like how I was feeling about it. And I noticed I was getting outreach from what we would call bigger and bigger, and I'm using air quotations here, guests uh, who are popular on Instagram. And I didn't like, I felt like I should have been excited. And I became aware that I wasn't. And so was sitting in front of me. And sometimes I struggled to find things I was actually interested in knowing. And that was really confusing for me because I had put all of this time and this energy into creating this baby that was the thought room, and it was now doing well. It was what everybody wants for their creative project. And suddenly I wasn't feeling the same way about it anymore. So for a while, I tried to keep going with it on the schedule. I had a team of 5 helping me edit and produce the podcast. And at one point, I just made an episode telling everybody I'm not really as excited right now to do this. I do plan on returning, but in order to be in integrity with myself, I need to pause and see what my soul is really saying about all this. So I just took a pause. This is the first time in 3 years or 77 episodes that I didn't put one out. And it was really weird and it felt really wrong. And I worried I was going to lose momentum and that I was going to become invisible. And I noticed I used to share on my Instagram story every day. And I noticed all of a sudden I didn't care to do that. And that freaked me out too. It's like, what's wrong with why don't I want to share anymore? But I was entering into a very sacred process, and what continues to be a very sacred process. And it was scary because when you spend so much time building a following, trying to get, people to see and interact with your content, and then you just decide to stop cold turkey, it was like coming off a drug because all of that external validation of the weekly thanks, this podcast changed my life or what, it just stopped. And so there was a lot of discomfort. For months I noticed I wanted, or I felt the impulse to share something on my story. Like I'd be holding my phone about to take a video of something I would have put on my story before. And then I realized I actually don't want to hear what anybody else has to, I don't want to receive the incoming. So why would I do it? And so I just kept listening and making sure that if I was going to share, I was really intentional about what I was looking to receive out of the exchange, if anything. And that's kind of how it started. I thought maybe I would take a couple months. It's now been over a year. And it was weird at first because, people want to see active content. So when it's not there, you start to see your followers just go down and go down and go down. And it was a new level of like my identity and my ego that was just um, dying, dying. So it was a very intense process. But the purge that I feel on the other side of extricating myself from a lot of, you know, we'll call it good intention distortion that's occurring on social media has provided me with the freedom to really do my inner work and create in ways that I've never had the space to create before.
The question that just feels like it percolates in this is, who am I when I'm no one? And for me, that is such a thing with social media. There's many of us who feel like we need to be someone, and it's built upon the foundations of I need to prove something, and I get to be seen this way. Look how good I am. Look how much I'm doing. Look at my life. It's
Mm-hmm.
incredible, and
Mm-hmm.
and it feels detached from the human experience.
Mm-hmm.
And it's actually like when I've been exploring that, and it sounds like you have as well, there's actually the wound of I'm not enough. I'm not enough as who I am as a human. And if we're building upon that foundation, it will never be stable. And yeah, like to be willing to watch. I'm very curious. When you were looking at this, did it feel like you were offering up your creation as like, I'm willing to sacrifice this for myself to be who I want to be in this world?
Yeah, it became necessary because I started to feel, I don't know if imposter syndrome is the right word, but I started to feel like I was wearing a mask. Where you're talking about my life is amazing, like that whole Instagram world. Oh, look how amazing my life is. And there were actually a lot of aspects of my life that I felt were really amazing. And so I was like, what if I just experience my life as amazing without needing to show anybody how amazing I am? For now, try that on. And really, Dean, it came out of growing in love with my best friend and this sort of unconditional love and acceptance that not a lot of people talk about because I frankly don't know that a lot of people have received it. I have been so blessed to receive it at this level that it literally shattered my experience of interfacing with this reality. It just wanted to strip all the masks were like I want to drop the masks around him. I'm tired and vulnerable and having this consistent repeated grace and patience and love and care extended with my every ugly thing I put in front of him made me reach this place of this is it. I mean, if it's not this, then what? Like, what am I after? So suddenly I had more than I'd ever had before. I had everything. And my energy wanted to go into healing these parts of myself that had been having to wear masks for so long.
What a journey. What was the journey like that in perhaps being someone who's done this work for a while? And for me, I've seen this in myself where it's like, oh, I've done the work, and there's an ego that comes on. I don't have more, and then it's like, oh, there's actually this slowness and grace that's needed to take time with these wounded parts of ourselves that have been shut down and suppressed for so long. What has it been like to actually really allow them the slowness and grace they've needed?
Hard and messy and scary, really very. And I don't sugarcoat that for people. I'm not here to do that anymore. I think we can talk about things being hard and scary and we can still talk about hope at the same time. I think that's really, really important. But to sugarcoat the difficulty of turning into ourselves and into the pieces that are really crunchy, it doesn't serve any of us. So it was really messy. It was really messy. I felt at times confused, very confused. I wondered if I was losing it. Am I losing my mind? I went through pockets of really intense anxiety and depression. These are all things that we diagnose in people and we prescribe medications for. And I'm not going to say that, if someone wants to make that choice and it feels aligned for them, I'm not going to say that that's wrong. But I also want to say that I think, as someone who's had repeated dances with depression and anxiety throughout my life, I now understand that this is the soul's natural way of purging these masks. These symptoms are not the problem. They are the flags coming up to say, hey, something's out of balance here. And when I see those symptoms, my role is to listen. So there was a lot, there is, and there was a lot of listening.
When I think of the word depression, even the name of the word itself, depressurize, and like just the consideration, I've been looking at the number of people in this world who have been diagnosed with clinical depression. At the moment, we're sitting at over 300 million. That number is boggling. That says something about our culture. It says something about our society. And like the individual, I agree. For me, it screams of the soul of like, hey, be with me, slow down, listen. I'm trying to tell you something. Can you just be here? And for me, this is where the work is, because that's what's happening on the collective. There's 300 million people screaming out that something isn't right and we're not listening. And until we listen to the self, I don't see another way.
Mm-hmm. Did your parents teach you how to slow down and listen to yourself? Did anyone model with you how to be?
No,
Were you
I'm
taught
lost.
in school how to slow down and be?
Yeah.
No. No, not here in the West, There are cultures around the world. Uh Yogananda started some schools in India and such, where the children are taught from a young age these sorts of things that are deeply missing in our culture. So, yes, you're right. This is absolutely missing. And then the other piece of depression is we think we should know how to be okay. And we try to do it ourselves without support because we live in a society where people own or rent their own box with their own items inside. We call it a house or an apartment. And our sense of community is it's highly isolated. If you were to go to Africa and look at the Dagara tribe, for example, they live in community. People are outside all the time. They're talking in the streets. Everybody is involved in everybody's relationships because the health of the individual, the wellness of the individual is seen as the wellness of the community. Every member of the community is valued. Their gifts are vital to the well being of the community. So it's not like, oh, you're broken. We need to help you because you're not okay. It's like, oh my gosh, an extension of me, which is the spirit of the community, which is also for them connected to spirit. And a part of me is not well, and the whole community comes into support. When a couple gets married, the whole community is married. When a woman has a baby, the whole community raises the baby. The child could nurse on another woman. The child could be taken for a day from their aunt with their aunt or their uncle, and the mom's just tending other kids. It's just how it works. And so there's this deep sense of community support. The other thing with community is it's very vulnerable because you can't live with people and not have them see your shit. Eventually, your shit's going to come out. And in the West, we really like to keep our shit on lock. We really like to zip it up. And so there's the shame of not only am I feeling these heavy, 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 deep feelings, I don't know how to help it, and no one else can help me. I'm alone. And that's why it's as you say, probably one of the most dangerous things that's happening uh, in our culture.
Sounds when you're speaking that there's been this internal journey with this of seeing what you yourself have needed in this time of your own uh, depression and anxieties and revealing of yourself. And in that, have you seen the beliefs and the challenges to your ego and who you think you have to be to do that, and how that might apply to the greater world as well?
Mm-hmm. You know, it's interesting. You were talking about the word depression, and I watched a video. I think it was a speech from Jim Carrey, maybe on YouTube, and he's quoting somebody else, one of his guides or spiritual teachers, who told him that de- depression is the need for deep rest, depressed, deep rest. And it's because your soul is tired of wearing the masks. It's like, I give up. I don't want to be that anymore. And so we go into this state of self-preservation, of isolation, of natural rest. You know, we're like, oh, why don't I have energy? Something's wrong with me. But to me, it's like this really massive, I'm going to use the word again, purging of these ego structures, these personality identities that we're outgrowing. And it's very scary. It's very, very, it can be very scary. It can be very, very liberating. People, people who have not experienced depression, here's another thing. When you are depressed, at least in my experience, another reason why it's so difficult to receive support is because the majority of the world does not know how to give support. They do not know what it means to listen and empathize. And we are so codependent as a society, as in, Dean, if you express to me that you're not okay, I'm going to try and give you a quick, oh, have you tried breath work? Or well, have you tried this? And how do you feel when I just brush over all the pain that you've just laid at my feet and try and give you a solution? You feel like more depressed. Like, oh, wow. Yeah, thanks. I'll go try breath work. And you haven't received the compassion and the empathy that you need in that moment. Depression is not a bad day. We have to understand depression changes. The experience of depression is that you have a bad life. That's a very heavy thing to live with. And a lot of people were not taught by our parents how to sit with such discomfort. So we word vomit solutions or niceties that we think will assist the person, because we ourselves, as the one who's giving advice, aren't actually comfortable being with the person unless we can do something to help or fix. And the reality is, one of the best things that you can do with a person who's depressed, mind you, you need to have also your own sense of self and your own boundaries, because when somebody's in a heavy energy, it can, if we allow it to, draw our life force. If you have a, say, like a loved, like a partner or a parent who's really depressed, and you're their only support network, we feel guilty. We feel kind of unavailable. We feel like we should be available. They're looping on the same thing about how bad their life is. And it can be really overwhelming. So I want to say that as a caveat is, if you're trying to provide support, make sure you're supporting yourself as well, and keeping part of your attention on the inside in terms of your own boundaries and availability. But the best thing that you can do, I think the best thing someone could do for me in a state of depression is to listen and to genuinely be curious about the experience without cringing, without saying, oh, but well, you also have this going for you. Someone who's depressed doesn't need you to remind them of the things they should feel grateful about. They already know how they should be feeling. Society is really good at telling us that. They want you to just be with them in the terror of how they're feeling and not try to change them. That's profound.
What has it meant when someone's really taken the time to sit with you in that and just be with you while that's happening?
Well, it's a magical thing. We have this whole idea of what helping means in society, and so many people want to help and like change the world, and we have our idea of what helping somebody else might be. But unless we're listening, or unless you directly ask, like, you know what, I'm feeling a little deflated right now because I kind of feel like I'm not helping. And I really want to know, what would helping actually mean for you? Do you want me to offer some thoughts? Do you want me to reflect back to you what I'm hearing, or would you just like me to listen? And that's a way to take self-responsibility for if we notice ourselves trying to fix and change things. But for me, I am pretty adept at like self, I don't want to call it coaching, but like being with myself. A lot of trauma happens. I was gonna say a lot, but I want to say pretty much all trauma happens in relationship. We're in a universe built of relationships, whether that's two people or an object or something. There's a relationship that something goes wrong, even if it's the relationship with self, and a trauma occurs. So some people, such as myself, can do a great deal of healing on their own, journaling and breath work and meditation and trying to rise above the feelings. But a lot of this is relational. It's based on where trust was broken, it's based on hurt that wasn't witnessed by another. And sometimes we can spin our wheels in the mud trying to fix ourselves when really what the soul yearns for is to be unconditionally witnessed, just witnessed by another during a time where we're having a difficult time witnessing ourselves. So that's when I am witnessed by another in this state that we're talking about. Oftentimes, the process can complete itself. Whatever the emotion is that I was stuck in, the moment I get it out, I get to share with someone, and I notice that they're not just listening to me, they're feeling it with me. I'm no longer alone. I'm no longer alone in the feeling because somebody has been willing to feel with me and I feel understood. And oftentimes that's enough to just crack a little bit of window open and the fresh air to start coming into the process.
It's such a beautiful experience when we do have those moments. And we see it as, like you're saying, a lot of these is coming from trauma where we haven't had the experience to allow the emotion, the energy to move, and that other person helps give, I don't want to say permission, but helps regulate ourselves in that so that energy can move. It's like, hey, it's safe to be here. It's safe to be in that. And that just allows them to be like, oh, I can be here, even in this. And that's
Mm-hmm.
perfectly okay.
Mm-hmm. And it's valid. When you start talking about all the things that have gone wrong in your life or what's not working, and someone says, yeah, that makes sense. I would feel that way too. I can understand why you feel that way, instead of, well, yeah, but have you tried this? And well, maybe you just need to do this, or it's, you can feel it, but we don't even need to be in that conversation for you to feel the collapse of what it feels like to reach out for intimacy when you're in your most vulnerable state and have somebody be unable to meet you.
I love this permission you gave earlier on, which for me is a deeper truth. And the first stage of this is admitting as humans we often don't know. Like we live in a world where we want to know. We have all the information at the tips of our fingers, and it's like, I should know how to fix this. I should know how to solve this. I should know how to change this. But there's a beauty on what you shared before of like the genuine desire to help someone, but not knowing. And there's a vulnerability in this share, but also a permission that creates openness when we can have the internal sense of awareness to drop into the deeper truth, but also take ownership in it. Hey, I don't know what you need right now. I desire to help you. Do you need me to listen? Do you need me to hold you? Is there something I can do for you? There's this beautiful thing that happens, and I see this in the collective as well, that we don't know how to fix much of what's happening right now. And the fixing is the problem, because then we create another problem, and it just covers up the deeper wound, the deeper problem underneath. And when we give that space to just be like, I don't know. And for me, this has been a very personal journey at the moment of like, I don't know what I need at times. And it's like, oh, I should know. I'm a coach and a mentor, and I should know exactly what I need. And it's like, I don't know what I need at times. And just the permission to not know, to then come to a place of curiosity of, oh, I don't know what I'm needing right now. Okay. Can I just be in that? Can I allow the not knowing to then allow naturally life to emerge and the curiosity to come? And it can be the same with other people of when someone shares, just taking that moment and be like, oh, I don't know what's needed right now. And that permission, that pause, and just taking the breath is so rejuvenating to receive. If someone comes to me and it's like, I don't know what you need right now, but I'd love to help you. What do you need? It's like, oh, it gives sovereignty back to myself. It helps me come into my own power rather than trying to be fixed or changed or anything. And it's like, oh, I have the power to enact, and maybe I don't know. And it's like, can you just sit here? And there's such beauty in that.
Mm. Yeah, absolutely. And that's the thing my partner will often do with me if I can name the feeling. Sometimes I can't, but there's just a sense of discomfort. And he'll just sit with me and he'll just say, can I be with you? And I'll say, yeah. And we just be. It's really simple. It doesn't make it all go away, but it does allow me to move through the process not feeling so alone. So I'm 100% on board. We could all really probably take a master class in what listening is, what connecting is, what genuine empathy is, what curiosity is. I love what you said about the pause, because what I notice in the conversations where I feel the least received is when it seems like the person is waiting till I finish speaking and they've got a point in their head from something that I said that they want to jump in, they want to interject with. I see this in a lot of podcasters as well, especially, oh gosh, I'm going to sound judgmental, but like really like kind of broy podcasts where we're just kind of going to spit off all of the really smart biohacky stuff that we know. And we're going to stack facts and we're going to cut each other off. And we're going to create this like really packed podcast. And that's not the way that I like to do it. I mean, that works for a lot of people and it's very efficient time wise, I suppose. But if you really want someone to feel heard in your presence, an invitation is after they've finished verbally processing, pause for 5 seconds. It's hard for people who are uncomfortable with silence, who think they need to have the answers, who are afraid that other person will worry they're not listening. That's not real. If you take a pause and you still have eye contact with someone who's just shared something incredibly deep with you, they know you're listening. You don't have to have the answers. In fact, I don't trust people who think they have all the answers right away. That's not the experience we're living here as human beings. So that invitation to pause because you, as in the one who's holding space, you are not healing somebody else. You are not doing the healing work. People coaching, and now I'll say I don't even really resonate with that term for myself anymore, but it's like, oh, I, this shaman, I healed them, or you're not doing the healing. Healing happens. Healing happens whether you're trying to heal or not, because that is the journey of soul. So if anybody listening to this is ever afraid they're not healing, you are. It might look gnarly because a broken bone is going to get a bunch of inflammation before it comes back to regulation. The body the body and the soul and the psyche, they have their processes. You are healing. You are not doing the healing. The healing is happening. You can make yourself more available to the process of healing by agreeing to turn into it versus to numb out. You can decide that you're not going to externalize your power. You're not going to hire people who think they have all the answers, who are going to tell you exactly what to do. You're going to trust in people who will consistently turn you back toward yourself and help you when you feel unclear to just reflect what they're hearing. And then you get to reflect if that's what you mean. But that's how we help others heal, is by being the most hollow bone and the clearest mirror that we can possibly be for their experience. It's not about me. If I give you my reflection, Dean, this is what I just heard you say. Is that correct? And you're like, no, that's not really it. My ego isn't hurt. I'm not like, oh, I'm not a good coach. I didn't offer the perfect. No, like we're in a process of curiosity. My role is to help you pull out the pieces that you're looking for. I might be effective, I might not, but I can't get my ego all wrapped up in whether or not I'm helping you, or it's about me, not about you.
Love this for so many reasons. And you were speaking, and I need to share this just so people are aware of what happens when you were speaking at the start of like when you're listening, to actually wait and listen and wait for them to finish and pause. I could witness my mind of like, oh, I want to say that point, that point, that point. And I was laughing at the hilarity of what the mind does, the ego of wanting to insert itself. And it's just like, actually, every time I just waited, you said the point that was coming alive in my mind. You were following the same thread and it just came alive. It was like, I didn't have to do anything. I didn't need to guide or make anything happen. It was just all here, all wanted to be here. And just to have the awareness to witness and come back, like, no, this is what's happening. This is what wants to happen. And I just love the permission you're given in that of, hey, like, can we detach from the need to be the person who brings the message? Can we detach from almost the guru complex of I need to be the one and to be in service to the space? Like you're speaking the hollow bone. It's not trying to be, I'm the mightiest hollow bone. It's just the one that can flow with the channel. And that's what we need in this world. And I think where you spoke earlier, the industry needs to come. It's like I've witnessed this. People are trying to be on the mountaintop declaring I'm the one, where we need to come to the bottom of the valley and sit and listen and wait. And that feels so much healthier.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I love that you just had a little microcosmic experience of what I was talking about with the waiting and the listening, because that is precisely what happens when we leave that extra 5 seconds. Oftentimes, you'll notice, one might notice, and one might not have noticed before because they have not ever left that space before. But once you start leaving that space for somebody, quite often they'll pick it back up again. They are guiding themselves through a process. And if you have ego, you're going to feel like, well, am I even important in this interaction? Do they even care what my opinion is or what I have to say? That doesn't have a space there. Or they're ignoring me. No. Are you energetically agreeing to participate in this conversation of holding space for this other person? Yes or no? First, you have to get clear on that. Because sometimes we can get sucked into things and we start feeling all resentful and this other person doesn't appreciate me and all this because we've made an unconscious agreement to be in that conversation. If you are choosing to be there for this person, then all of that has to go out the window. It really just is about this person's process. And we need to do our internal integrity checks of, am I giving to this person disingenuously? And what I mean is to look like a good person, or because I think I should, because they're my family member. That's all your shit. You have to get that out of the way before you pretend that you're available to hold space for someone. You really do. That's a very, very important piece. And yeah, with the podcasting thing that we have in common now is I have a very interesting experience of earlier on in my podcasting, we'll call it career. I noticed I would have those impulses too, where I would have a really good question come up. Oh, yeah, I know this fact. Or sometimes somebody's mansplaining, sorry to use that term, but they're explaining something to me that I know a lot about. And there's a part of my ego that wants to go, oh, yeah, you mean like this? And like, I know about that. And start just stacking on top of what they're saying. And what I do is I watch that impulse. I focus even more deeply on the person's eyes. I make sure I'm still with their thread of what they're saying versus going into, oh, I can't forget this awesome question that I have going on right now. And I put it to spirit. I say, if you want this question to be asked, provide the space. And sometimes that person will just feel my energy and they'll just go, huh, okay, that's complete. And then I'll get to share the piece. And other times they keep going because they're in a process and I do not interrupt them. If somebody is sharing a really deep story, just because I think I have something smart to say, doesn't mean I should say it. So again, just really being in tune with keeping a part of your attention on the inside and also your attention with that person that you're tracking and witnessing.
Vulnerability in that. And I think this is the reflection for people in conversation in general. It's how many of us do that, where it's like, oh, I need to hold this point. I need to go back. And it's like, maybe. And the vulnerability of not knowing what's needed next. I don't, I've often had this thought. It's like, where do my thoughts or the words that come out of my mouth come from? Because I'm not thinking about them when I'm speaking in my channel. I'm not, they're just coming through. And it's like, oh, can I trust that? And it's like, as humans, we want to control, but actually, the intimacy, the moment, just offers so much.
Mm-hmm. One of my deepest lessons in this was, again, earlier on in my podcasting journey when I had an interview scheduled with former Mr. Olympia, Dorian Yates, big bodybuilder, highly decorated guy, over 1 million followers on Instagram, and here I am, this just like rookie podcaster who's barely given 5 interviews at that point, I think. And I'm preparing for this interview, which I don't do anymore. I don't prepare for the interviews. And this is actually kind of where I got to through this process. But I spent a day researching Dorian. I ended up, no, it wasn't Dorian Yates. Dorian was the interview that I did after that. So let me back up. The interview I was doing was Dr. Dennis McKenna, famous ethnobotanist, ethnopharmacologist who, brother of Terence McKenna, highly influential people in the psychedelic renaissance. And so Dennis McKenna has been on so many podcasts, including Joe Rogan and all of these things. So I'm preparing, nervous little newbie, to interview this legend. And at the time, I'm living at this ayahuasca center. So psychedelics for me are like this exciting new frontier. And so I watch his interviews on Joe Rogan, and he tells some really fascinating stories. And I research him a little bit online, and I come up with this list of questions. And in my actual experience of the interview with my little notebook next to me, I start asking these questions that I believe are going to get Dennis to start telling some of the same stories that I thought as a listener were very exciting stories. What I failed to recognize is that Dennis had been asked those same questions and those same stories for decades. And maybe nobody else could notice, but because of my empathic sense sitting across from him, when I would say, "So tell me about this time," it was a fraction of a second, but I could see him kind of go, "Yeah, okay," and then go into it. But I could sense that it wasn't what he was excited about. He was humoring me, but there was almost an air of like, yeah, this same old shtick. So I learned an incredibly valuable lesson, which was I wasn't available to the magic that wanted to arise between he and I because I wasn't really listening. I was planning. So my next interview was with Dorian Yates. I know nothing about bodybuilding. And I'm going, all right, I guess people listening to this are going to want me to ask bodybuilding questions and all about Dorian's bodybuilding. He had so many fans. I was like, oh, they're gonna hate me because I don't know anything about bodybuilding. Well, I had just learned this lesson through Dennis, so I prepared nothing for Dorian, who has a way bigger following even than Dennis, and I just showed up. And the result was one of my favorite interviews I've done. And if you go on YouTube to watch it, it's probably our most watched interview on YouTube, on the thought room. And the comments are people are just saying, wow, I've never seen this side of Dorian before. I've never heard him talk about his musical interests or how he likes Broadway or his children, because I showed up genuinely curious and available. I didn't put on any masks of what I should know about his story. And I just sat across from a person that I wanted to learn more about. So beautiful, beautiful lesson.
The permission to be human in this, I love, and recognizing we're all just humans and we just want to be seen as human. And
Mm-hmm.
that's such a beautiful gift. And before we wrap up, I just want to know what is on your heart? Is there anything that you would love to bring to this space or share, just as anything that wants to be here right now?
Hmm. Thank you for that invitation. I'm going to feel into it for just a moment. These are strange times. These are really isolating times. These are times where Politics are loud. Social media is loud. This is a time where we're forgetting some of our basic human values, such as civil discourse and dignity, giving others the benefit of the doubt. And it's really unfortunate to see people planting rage bait online in the comment sections of things because there's so much collective grief and pain and anger. And so those who are leading or influencing, right? We have this thing where if someone's in a position of power, we make it okay for us to project our anger onto them because of their privilege or their power. And they need to be held accountable. Right. And this is a energy of shame. So you deserve to be held accountable. You deserve to be shamed for this view. And it's very polarizing. And I see a lot of our leaders going silent or pulling back to kind of reassess, like myself. Just I'm not choosing to participate in the swirl of that energy. I know who I am. I know how I serve. I know what my truth is. And I trust that the system that I feel like I'm outgrowing is probably going to crack at some point and a new one will rebuild itself. And I trust that the people who are meant to find me will find me, even if I'm living in the woods or traveling around in my little tour bus right now. I really trust in the universe to work things out, and everything is warring for our attention. If anyone out there is feeling confused or that times are not as simple as they used to be, you're not crazy. Things are intelligently designed in this moment to really almost like make us lose each other to the point where we find each other again. It's to separate us so deeply, it's to polarize us so deeply that it essentially shakes out these shadows from the human collective. Could it get worse before it gets better? Yeah. So, what are you going to do? What skills do you need to enter into the next year, 5 years, 10 years to set yourself up for the massive amount of change that's coming to the world as it always has, right? I'm not saying, oh, we live in this time where this is exceptional. No, there's always been wars. There's always been um, fires and earthquakes and abuse and famine and all of it. It's hard to look at. It's really uncomfortable. And everybody wants you to jump on a bandwagon. Everything is warring for our attention. Instagram runs ads. It didn't used to be like that. YouTube runs ads. You can't even, unless you buy a subscription, you can't even watch things without literally having pieces of content forced onto you, where you have to come over to the screen and click skip. And we just kind of brush over it because it's become so normalized. This is a really vital time to check back in with what your values are, how you stay centered, to look at your community, to look at your relationships, to have an honest talk with yourself if those are supporting you right now, or if you're hanging on to some things because you believe you should, or that's what a good person does. It's a time to make the change on the inner, and no matter how chaotic it gets, to stay in your center and to choose love in every small interaction to the best that you know how to. And if you're anything like me, you will fail. You will melt down at your partner. You will lose your patience with your parents or your kids. You will say something to a friend that hurts them. They will say something to you. And to just keep coming back home over and over again and really make sure that you have supports in place, whether that's, again, community or practices, ritual. If you don't resonate with ritual, just call it morning routine. What is the thing that you go to, that you return to with predictability, that allows you to stay oriented within time, that gives your day a sense of opening and closure? How do you stay inside your body when shit hits the fan? And that's the exploration that we're all in. So, yeah, I'm so grateful to have had this opportunity to talk to you about some of the things that are so important to me. I feel like we could have gone for hours.
Yes. I
So
was
much to
thinking that
cover.
I was thinking
Yeah.
that exact thing. We're slowing
Yeah.
down. It's like it opens the space for more and more. And yeah, that feels like an
Yeah.
invitation. This is the second time I've had that on this podcast of like people being like, we can go longer. So I
Yeah.
feel the
Yeah.
invitation. Hallie, this
Yeah.
has been such a beautiful experience to have you here, to share with you, to hear more of your story and create space for your sharing and share myself. It's really touched my heart and filled my cup today. I really, really appreciate you and who you are in this world, and may you continue to be who you are as you walk forward on this path.
Thank you so much, Dean. I have loved reconnecting with you. It's so wonderful to see you thriving and stepping into leadership and stepping into sharing your voice in these vulnerable ways and allowing other people to witness you and learn from your story. It's such a cool feeling to sense into the people who are listening to this right now. Like, this is your community, your own little community of people that have been magnetized to your energy and your light. And it is, yeah, it's just super exciting to me all these years later to be like, oh, awesome. Here we are. Of course. Yeah.
Yeah.
And so big hello and big love to your community. And if I can, extend any support to your community as well, just open invitation to send me a message if somebody heard me here and wanted to connect more deeply. They can reach me through the website or send me a message through my currently inactive Instagram, but I do check the messages. So, um, yeah, that's Hallie, HALLIE_Rosebud, for anyone who wants to chat. Thank you, Dean.
Anyone, absolute pleasure. For anyone that wants to connect, Hallie's links will be in the description below, so feel free to reach out. She's a wonderful woman. Her holding of me was one of the most beautiful experiences, so I can recommend her and just appreciate the light she is in this world. Check her out. She's not active on Instagram, so it feels weird to say go check her out, but it's still beautiful to have that connection and know there's additional support if you ever need. Wyrd Ways, thank you all for joining. Have a beautiful day.